recording this on Wednesday, the 25th of November. And if you did send me a note earlier wishing me happy birthday, then that's most kind. Thank you. Above and beyond the call of duty. If you follow my posts, you'll know that yesterday I put up a short comment on LinkedIn about a remark our son made. He's 7 years old, bless him. And he said to me, "Daddy, is it true tomorrow you'll be 44?" I said, "Well, yes, it is." He said, "Interesting." And I was so amused and bemused by what he meant by that and what was behind that comment that I put it up on LinkedIn almost immediately without really thinking about it, not realizing, of course, that it could be perceived and was perceived by more than one of you as being it's a shout out, he's fishing for birthday wishes, which was, of course, not my intention, but still, you're quite right to give me a ribbing for it. But the point is this: that encounter with a chat with our son yesterday, and it being my birthday today, I've been thinking a bit about my own birthdays over the years, and also thinking back to around the time when I was our son's age, when I was about 7-8 years old, because back then I can still remember really the first book that I truly fell in love with. Apart from arguably Richard Scarry, Cars and Trucks and Things That Go, the first book that I really remember just poring over for hours was a history book called The Time Traveller Book of Long Ago. And it was a story or a book about a little boy aged about, 7 or 8, I suppose, who gets a time traveller helmet that allows him to go back in time. And he goes back to be a fly on the wall to experience the life and stories of people at the time of the medieval knights in the 13th century and the Vikings, ancient Rome, ancient Egypt. And it was just fabulous. I loved it. Well, I still have that book. Here it is. I still have it all these years later. It's a bit battered now, but I kept it for our own children. They have looked at it. It's still got the address there for my parents where they lived in the Middle East at the time, a little sticker on there. And for me, as a boy, I just remember being lit up by this. I mean, it was just brilliant. I mean, for example, when I first saw, let me just get to the right page. Okay. I mean, the castle scene, I mean, I just loved it. It was total escapism. I was just immersed in it. And likewise, the ancient Roman bars and cutaways, all these different characters, and you got to follow different individuals around that time as they followed their stories, as they went through certain challenges and experienced certain aspects of life at the time. I guess what I'm coming to is this. It was my first really meaningful experience of loving, immersing myself in the world of other people's stories, and in particular in the case of history, of course. Some years later, I remember my father driving me home from school. I was about 11, 12 years old by this time. And he said to me, "Simon, remember this day." He was driving me home from school. I said, "Why is that, Dad?" He said, "The entire East German government has just resigned." I said, "Wow, that sounds like a big deal." He said, "Yeah." And sure enough, shortly after, we got to see the Berlin Wall come down. I remember being transfixed in front of our TV screen at home in a little village just outside Worcester in the West Midlands near Birmingham. You may know the area. And I was just bewildered. I mean, wow, but what as these communities came back together, of course, families reconnecting, friends who hadn't seen each other in years. And it was so emotional. I mean, I remember thinking, this is happening right now. It just blew my mind. I said to my parents, "How did that happen?" They said, "Well, they built a wall in August 1961. I said, "Well, why is that?" And they said, "Well, it's to do with Stalin at the end of World War II. What? What happened at the end of World War? Well, Germany was partitioned. Well, how come? Well, because of what, communist Russia? How did that come about? Well, it's to do with the Russian Revolution, Lenin." I became fascinated by how things start, if you like. I'd seen these things happening, and I wanted to understand what explained that. Well, some years after that, in my late teens, I remember sitting in University College, Oxford, interviewing for a place to study history. And when they said to me, "Simon, what would you like to talk about?" Would it surprise you to hear that the topic I chose was the Bolsheviks, and in particular, the role of Lenin in the Russian Revolution? Now, by this point, we're getting to a slightly different kind of book from the Time Traveller Book of Long Ago, but nevertheless, gives you an idea. And this is one of the books I did buy that year. It was published in 1994. I've still got it. And I mean, I pored over the events of the Russian Revolution. I found it totally gripping because it had meaning for me, because I had seen the Berlin Wall come down on my TV screen, and I felt like they were all part of that same narrative. They were linked. Some years beyond that, having taken an interest in political history, well, when I got the opportunity to work in politics and to be a part, in a very small way, I don't want to overstate it, but still play a small role in a small piece of the puzzle of British political history, I seized that opportunity to work in Parliament and then to run an election campaign in the 2005 general. So now we're getting to rather more personal type literature, right? Here's the candidate. She was 26 years old, running for Parliament in 2005. And yeah, it involved absolutely introducing her to voters, the life history, because she was a seriously local candidate. So these are family photos from 1910, around the time of the Russian Revolution, actually, 1910, 1920, that kind of period, of her family in the rugby club and the local farms or whatever. Personal history in relation to, of course, here, British politics. Thankfully, she was elected England's youngest MP in 2005. Tremendous experience. Thank goodness that she won the election, because a lot of work went into it on the part of the volunteers. So you can see the thread here, right? An interest in history, interest in stories. Where I'm getting to, I suppose, is to say that as I reflect over the years, and when better than one's birthday to do this, it runs deep with me. Now, I'm not saying there's anything unusual or distinct or particularly impressive about that, by the way. Lots of people love stories and so on, but there's certain things, aren't there, which really run deep with you and really have meaning for you. And to the point where now, from a professional skills point of view, it's things like this, building a story brand, which I'm reading, which I, by the way, recommend. It's a good book by Donald Miller. Yeah. So now this is obviously story craft from a professional skills point of view, in terms of brand building, in terms of building a business and so on. It's in my head, at least, right? It doesn't that there is a thread for those books, right? There's a continuity and interest in the past and helping to understand the history, personal history, and of course, in my work now, the last 12 years, I've been working with individuals from all walks of life. And what makes that work continually fascinating, apart from just simply getting to meet different sorts of people, it's not so much the functional skills side of my work, it's the opportunity to be a fly on the wall, a bit like that little boy with the time traveler book, time traveler helmet, to have the privileged insight into and an opportunity to explore individuals' histories, personal career history, the career history or the historical background of institutions or teams or particular projects, because from a speaking, from a spoken communication point of view, as you may well have experienced, drawing on relevant personal history can be tremendously powerful if it's done in the right way and aligned to relevant messages that you want to hit. What runs deep with you in terms of personal history? What are the interests that you have that were first ignited, maybe when you were a young child, that are still with you? They may not be as active as they were then, but I wonder, what are those threads? Because I suggest there's tremendous power in those interests, values, relationships, perhaps experiences that you can really track back over time, because that provides you in your own mind with real credibility that this is something that I care about. In the last 2 or 3 weeks, I've been running some sessions with school leavers preparing for university, and specifically interview skills, and in many cases preparing for Oxford and Cambridge interviews. And one of the things that I say to those individuals is, whether you get the opportunity to talk about this at interview or not, doesn't matter. My question to you is, when do you first remember the subject you're wanting to study being important to you? When was your first encounter with it? For me, it's of course Time Traveler Book of Long Ago, and in particular the Berlin Wall experience, because it helped to explain my choice of topic for Oxford interview. What was their experience? There was one boy I remember who wanted to study economics and management. Well, when he tracked it back, it stemmed from him as a boy being given the opportunity to look after the shop that his father ran, because his father had to go and take stock in the in the store cupboard out the back, and he aged whatever it was, 8 or 9 years old, was in charge, and he got to run the till and to serve a customer and give him change. That was a really important deal for him. That was his first meaningful encounter with economics and business. Well, shock horror, some years later, he's applying to study economics and management at one of the finest universities in the country. What runs deep with you? What has stood the test of time? Because there is power in their experience. If you're watching this anywhere other than simonbucknell.com, check it out. That's my website, my digital home online, or indeed would love for you, if you're not already, to follow me here on LinkedIn. If you're watching this on LinkedIn, that is, or drop a comment or a thumbs up. Be delighted to hear from you, and we'll speak soon.